We also are planning for our payments of our principal and loan on our various financing, which is a lot simpler now. We have two loans for our facilities. The bonds that we closed on this past year, $52 million, and then our Anacostia Elementary new market tax credit debt of $24.2 million. We're budgeting private revenue of about 1.8 million, which is significantly lower than our budget held last year, but is more in line with our actual expectations, both for this current year and moving forward. Net cash flow is positive $780,000 in our budget, with an operating income of about 3 million and a net income of negative 2.8. And our projection is that our end of year cash and fixed income balance would be just under 34 million. And that cash and fixed income means cash plus our US government treasuries, which we have invested in. The last table and point 14 just shows that we are budgeted to meet all of our covenants as required by our various banking agreements and loans. Last things that I'll point out are on the following page related to our budget assumptions. As I mentioned, we have 2,126 students that we are budgeted for, which is a decrease from our budgeted count last year, but pretty much flat in terms of our actual enrollment from this year. Staff members, as I mentioned, pretty much flat in terms of the number of staff we're expecting. We do expect to see pretty high inflation in just general expenses this year. Again, relative to historical averages, we're budgeted 4% inflation on general expenses. And then the following couple of pages show the budget breakdown by year compared to prior years, by location across our campuses, and then for the organization as a whole. Terry or Dan, are there anything you all would like to add as folks who have reviewed this and are members of the committee?
We discussed it at some length, as mentioned, gave unanimous approval. You know, we had quite a discussion on the occupancy or the loss of students, and wishing that we were back in the good old days with 100%, where we had plenty of students, but we're showing what, a 94% student to desk ratio.
Correct.
Today, and we can talk about that later, but it has our committee's approval.
Just a quick question. Do you know how the at-risk population index is calculated, or what the definition of that is?
So from a city perspective, at risk is considered either families that are experiencing homelessness or receiving a variety of different types of government benefits, TANF, SNAP, etc.
Okay.
And so we make an estimation each year on what percentage of our students we anticipate will be categorized at risk. And the reason that feeds into the budget is that there's some funding that the city provides to provide additional support services for at-risk students. So from our kind of estimation, we kept that at-risk level flat from the prior budget year. We're expecting about the same ratio of students who are categorized as at risk this coming year.
Okay. We got a higher percentage, a little bit more pop for those at-risk students this year. Is that correct?
Each of the last 2 years, the DC Council has increased the multiplier that they use to calculate at-risk funding. In practice, it's a very small incremental amount of additional funding, but it is additional funding, and so we're grateful for that.
And we have the discretion to do what we want with those, or does it have to be spent on something specific?
It's not dictated the exact sort of place it gets spent, but it's intended to be used to support those students who are categorized as at risk.
And I know, Laura, when we talked earlier, you had mentioned that there are some plans to try to plus up the 94 with some, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, so we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about that in September. And right now, Dan and Vanessa and Alicia and, there's a whole bunch of folks who have put together a list of priorities that we're gonna be doing from now through the fall to make sure that we are both getting the word out about DC Prep and also really welcoming new families, because we know that the more that we're making families feel a part of our communities, the more successful we've been at having them also refer others, because word of mouth has been like our strongest recruiting mechanism.
Yep.
But we would be very glad to give like a comprehensive update in the fall.
We did talk about that in terms of how much money in the budget is allocated towards recruitment. I think Dan said it's an increase, but there's only so many ads on buses that get a return. So we had a robust conversation and sort of said we'd revisit it in September.
Yeah, and what we'll do then also is illustrate the ways in which direct recruitment is kind of like one facet of like the overall work that we're doing to make sure that we're investing in students and families. And I think by coming to you and sharing the comprehensive set of strategies, and I think that will actually also tie into some of the work that Cassie will be describing through the school plan to illustrate what we think we need to do to make sure that we're delivering on the experience that families expect of us, and the work that we need to do in the year ahead to make sure that we're continuing to listen and refine what we do to provide the service that families are looking for.
I would ask that you consider, I don't know if it's worth it or not, but I was listening to radio on 96.3 one night, which is Howard station, and there was a charter school that was advertising on there, and immediately popped in my head. I was like, I wonder if this is it worth it or something that we should consider? I know word of mouth, I would agree with you that that's the priceless thing, but I wonder if it's worth advertising on some of the local Black stations with the radio ad or something. So,
Thanks for that. We'll concur.
okay. Any more questions on the budget or concerns from anyone? If not, could I get a motion to approve the FY24 proposed budget?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Ahmad.
Yes.
All right, Mercedes.
Yes.
Lisa.
Yes.
Pam.
Yes.
Those in the room? Ayes. All right. The motion is approved. So the FY24 is no longer proposed budget. It is now an approved budget.
Thanks, everybody. And Ahmad, my apologies. I didn't mean to neglect to name you as a member of the committee. I forgot that you're up on the screen.
No problem. I'm not there in person, so it's not as obvious. But thank you.
All right, Cassie, I will pass the baton to you.
Oh, so excited. What's the code we're using, Jay? Is it a secret code? So I can
If you-
display. Should I send it to you? You can. Because that might be the best. Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna send this to Jay. So I'm gonna talk about our school plan, which I sent, Laura and Jane sent over as a part of the board material. Every year we write a school plan. We think about our strategic multi-year plan, and we write an annual plan that helps anchor us for the year. We have a shared school plan across our 6 schools. They certainly tailor and make it their own for every campus and community. Our theme this year for our school plan is Mission Possible, All Adults for All Students. And we're really focused on our mission, which is a deep source of pride for all of us at DC Prep, and really pushes us to think about how to make sure each of our kids is deeply known and loved, and that we have high expectations and rigor and challenge and joy and love and opportunity. That's what we feel like makes DC Prep special. And so our focus for the school plan is on serving all kids as a fundamental right and thinking about what our families really want for their kids and what is our promise to them. And so our driving theories, if you go 2 more, our driving theories in this year's school plan, there's 3 big ones. The first one is a focus on better supporting our students who have the greatest needs. We're really, the way we think about this is when we serve our kids who have the greatest needs, it helps us serve all of our students better because no kids are the same. And so we're really thinking about the kids on the margins and the kids who have the most significant needs. We're going to serve all kids better. And so that includes thinking about our inclusion model, our collaboration structures, and how we intervene, especially the kids who were hit hardest during the pandemic. We are still facing the impact of that in terms of academic recovery. And so we have some key grade levels that we're focused on and students, particularly students with special populations, English language learners, IEPs.
What grade levels are those specifically?
The focus for our grades is really 2nd through 6th grade. That's where we're still seeing the impact of the pandemic because those students, based on what they missed, and really kind of extending into 7th grade next year as well. The second big theory is focusing on providing all students with rigorous programming and expanding the opportunities we offer. So we're thinking a lot about our school and student culture, our family partnership, and concretizing all of our rituals and incentives. How do we create both emotional safety and belonging for kids, but also physical safety in our schools, and expanding our field trips and our extracurriculars, which I'll talk more about, as well as our SEL, our social emotional learning program that we offer. And the third big theory is how do we help our adults work better as a team? So making traction with those kids means that you need a team of people that is talking about them and working really well and clear on their roles, their responsibilities, what programs they use, what resources they can rely on, how they get help, and how do they execute on that as a team. So those are kind of the big theories. If you go to the next slide.
Quick question.
Yeah.
What are those 3, or remind us what those 3 were last year?
What those last year, our theme was slow, slam, build. And so we're building on that because we slowed down our goals. We were coming back from the pandemic and we had always had really rigorous goals. We really did not meet them. And then when we came back, or during the pandemic, we didn't really know where we were because we weren't assessing kids in the same way and we weren't running any sort of programming in the same way. And so last year we said, let's take a slower approach to building back to where we want to get to with kids. That was the slow piece. Let's be more slim and narrow about what we're focusing on. And it was really focused on like clear program and social, emotional, and wellness support for kids. And the build was like build back to being in person and build to like where we want to go with our OrgEvo strategic work. Like we're still doing, we came back from the pandemic still committed to doing a lot of that OrgEvo work. So we came back with a new approach to student discipline, implementing the non-departmentalization in the elementary schools, having the assistant teacher, lead teacher model in early childhood.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Do we, I think Park was a couple of months ago, so I don't know if those results are back yet, but I remember last year we didn't do as well as we wanted to do, but we still did better than the other public schools across the city and stuff. Yeah. Do we know kind of where we are?
We won't get Park results usually until August or September. We have our interim results, which our students are just finishing taking, and we see some early signs that there will be definite pockets where it will be a lot better in line with where we would predict. For example, our math and achievement is looking a lot stronger. We just today found out that we met our NWEA goals for the charter board for kinder first and second, which is really great. So it's definitely a lot of our early childhood. We met all of our class goals. So definitely positive signs, but we still have a long way to go. So strategically, like what we're paying attention to is we are still very much facing academic recovery and social emotional needs of our kids as a result of the pandemic. I know that this group has talked about the changes in the talent market. We're thinking about those. We're thinking about what our staff want and what they want for their experience to work in our schools so that they will stay and be here for a long time and we'll keep all of our top talent. We're really thinking a lot about what families want. It's a big topic. Like, how are we going to really find out what our families want and how we can best serve them? We're thinking about the challenges with meeting our student enrollment targets and the financial implications of having this coming year be the last year where we have the additional funding, the stimulus funding. So those are kind of like strategic considerations that went into our school plan. And our goals for this year, which is on the next slide, are student outcomes, that we grow all kids in reading and math. And we're doing that through improving our co-teaching, how the adults work together, and our inclusion model, how we serve all kids. We're thinking about the student experience, very much attendance and reducing truancy by making sure that our schools are happy and safe places where kids come and feel encouraged, connected, confident, joyful. Our attendance has also not recovered since the pandemic, and our kind of playbook that we used to use to get kids to come to school, where we had consistently 95% attendance, we need a new playbook. And so we've been really trying to rethink what that means. Family experience, just reestablishing ourselves as the school that families choose to ensure their kids are ready for competitive high schools and colleges, and our staff experience, that all staff feel they can do their roles successfully and joyfully. So those are like our goals that we are driving towards. We obviously have quantitative metrics with all of them as well, but these are kind of the high level. Any questions about these?
I have a sort of a process question about the plan as a whole, which is, how do you put it together? And when I ask that, what I'm really asking is, how do you get buy-in? I mean, is it a big group effort? Do you have small committees? How does that work?
That's actually, Jade, will you go to the next slide? That's exactly what I was going to say next, which is we use a really inclusive process. It's really exciting and time consuming and fun. We had task forces, which I think you all heard about some of the work the task forces did. So a lot of the work that the task forces worked on shapes the school plan and contributes to it. We have a series of principal cohort meetings where we talk about what are we hearing, looking at our data, listening to our feedback, listening to what we want to do, thinking about what we want to move forward. So the principals are very involved. They're obviously the most tapped into their schools. They hold leadership team meetings where they talk about the school plan. There's several like set structures where the principal is talking to the leadership team. At 2 of our day-to-days, so the one in October and then the one in January, we get full staff input. So we do breakout sessions and small groups and collect input and use their input to shape the draft. We hold family town halls on the school plan and collect their input. We do, in April, we kind of give the draft. At that point, it was draft 7, if that gives you a sense of like how many drafts went in front of different people. And then we held leader listening sessions as well, where Laura and I met with every leadership team to talk and hear and listen with them. So it's a lot of bus stops to try to build a system. And I think this year's plan, the staff are really excited about. Yeah. So I was going to just share a little bit about, we have 4 key initiatives that fit under those big umbrellas that we're driving towards. And I was going to talk a little bit about each of these. I'm happy to answer more questions. The first big initiative is about academic recovery, growth, and improving outcomes for kids. And the way we're doing this is we're working on like, what is our vision for what does it mean in a classroom when there's more than one adult? Because a lot of our classrooms, that's true. So there might be a teacher and an ELL teacher, a general education teacher and a SPED inclusion teacher, and sometimes a specialist. And so what does it actually look like? What is everyone's role? Like getting really clear on people's roles. And part of this school plan process was actually bringing them like, here's like drafts of what your roles could be, aligned to the program. And what will collaboration look like? And we like modeled and practiced like collaboration and meeting structures that we wanted to recommend and suggest. We're providing a lot more resources going into this year. So for both ELA, math, early childhood, and science, so 4 of our biggest subject areas. For science, we invested, and our science teachers were a part of the process in a brand new curriculum, which is really amazing and beautiful and has all the bells and whistles. For early childhood, we're revamping our read aloud curriculum to make sure that it has more connection to our students. We haven't revamped it in 10 years and it really needed to be. So a lot more cultural competency, more connection to SEL. We're also adding in a phonemic awareness and a foundational reading program in pre-K that aligns with what our kindergartners do. Why are we just doing this now? But we're doing it. It's going to be wonderful. That's kind of early childhood. Reading, we are providing, our teachers receive unit plans and we're providing the student-facing materials, and we're actually providing 2 sets that have accommodations that teachers can use to choose from, but they all work towards the same goal so that the rigor is not compromised. And we're doing the same thing for math. So we've been hard at work on those, and yeah, just a lot on like how you work together and how do you serve all kids and what is your role in that. That's probably the biggest initiative. We're gonna spend a lot of time on. Any questions about that one? Yeah.
Is our reading in line with the latest science and changes in the field? How are you teaching reading?
We believe in the science of reading, and we have had a both and, I would say, approach to teaching reading, but we've been on the cutting edge, I guess you would say. We are in line with where everything is going in terms of science of reading. There is new legislation that will impose requirements from the city council that will require us to change things in the next few years. But I don't think anything philosophically or programmatically that we're doing is misaligned with what the research is indicating. So we teach foundational reading, K to 3, we use a really evidence-based research program called Foundations. We use another one for phonemic awareness called Haggerty. And we also do components of balanced literacy of making sure that we have independent reading libraries, and we do small group literacy, guided reading groups. So we have like a both and. But it is gonna be a lot when the legislation passes, because there's requirements about certification and training, and they may actually even mandate specific curriculums. I think that kind of covers that initiative. The second big initiative is all about attendance and making sure that we help get kids here every day. And this is a lot of this is on our family partnership. So our attendance is actually better in our middle schools where our kids come themselves, because we can help support and incent them to come. It is actually harder with our youngest kids, and our preschool, pre-K, and kinder is our lowest attendance, as well as attendance on Wednesdays when we dismiss at 2, and Mondays and Fridays. So it's a lot of the days. So we're thinking about leveraging, we're rebranding. We've had a summer day for new students that has been like an assessment day, and we're rebranding it and rethinking of it as a new family student day, and just much more like joyful, and not come in so I can test your kid, but like come in so you can get to know us and we can get to know you. We're going to host some early childhood and kinder kind of play dates over the summer, and popsicle playground things that the operations team is really taking a lead on. We're revamping our family orientations that we run in August to make them mandatory, but in a way that hopefully they want to come. So we're trying to think about how to make them really joyful and fun. We're reinvigorating our parent action teams, which kind of went by the wayside since COVID. So we're trying to bring those back to life. As I said, rethinking our attendance playbook, and really focused on early childhood and kinder family partnership.
You said the target is 95%. What are we enjoying? What is it this year?
I mean, the target is still 95%. Each campus last year was in like between 90 and 95.
We're not that far
80
away.
There were some in the high 80s, but it is when you think about it, because it's like you're missing 1 day out of every 10. You know, it's a lot and then not even, because that's not how it plays out. You have kids who have 95. That's one bucket. And then you have kids who are like, we have more kids truant than you could imagine. It's a lot of kids who are missing
And it's the
20,
same kids.
30, 40 days. Yeah.
And this is not,
It's not just a DC.
it's not a DC prep
Yeah.
thing. This is a struggle across the city
Very much.
that is, there's always been some of it, but it has become like much worse since COVID.
I understand.
And
I'm guessing we're well above the school, the city average.
there's, what was the report? You pulled the report, didn't you?
Of
That
attendance?
yeah, that like looked at us relative to peers. We are
We're in the
better than many
wheelhouse.
others.
We're not,
Yeah,
we're definitely
it's-
not way
we're not-
worse.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, like I said, before COVID, it was just,
Easy peasy.
yeah, it was something we did. And now it's like something we have to really spend a lot of,
Understood.
the amount of problem solving for one individual family who's that truant, to get them, to support them, to change their habits and figure out what is the root of the problem. Really like kind of time consuming, targeted investment. So that's.
Yeah, because I wonder if there are like any commonalities or all of them like unique? Are they, is there, I wonder if there's a common data set or each truancy is its own unique set of circumstances?
I think that's where we're trying to pair the like, okay, where are the trends? Early childhood and kinder. So let's target helping the families feel really connected to the school and kind of more ownership over. The hard thing is preschool and pre-K is not compulsory in Washington DC, but it counts towards our attendance goals. So it's this tricky balance where,
I wonder.
Yeah. Or like we're targeting Wednesdays. So for example, on Wednesdays, we're gonna have wonderful Wednesdays at every school, community meetings, we're moving them all to Wednesdays to try to make Wednesday like the fun day you don't wanna miss. Cause that's the day as a parent, they're like, oh, I have to pick them up at 2. I have too many things. I'm just not gonna bring them. So we're trying to do those kinds of things with the data we have.
Have you spoken to like, I wonder if like, let's say there's a kid that's like the highest truancy, like to their family going like, hey, let's really get to the root of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, that is a lot of the work that we're
That we're
trying to
trying to
do.
do,
It's
yeah.
just that is,
Is it something that
Complex.
we can correct or is it something bigger, right? Like,
I think it depends on the kid and the family.
Yeah.
Some of it is stuff we can do more like, we kind of think about it, it's like, what are the tier 1 things that we can do for everyone? Like
yeah,
move the Wednesday thing to make Wednesdays more fun. We're trying to host a monthly event where preschool, pre-K, kinder families are in the classroom and like build more of a like, I know the parents of the other kids, more kind of
mhm,
ownership. We're doing little things like Dean's List, which is our disciplinary system that we use. It's going to have 2-way texting, which will be really good. So a teacher can literally just like text the parent right away. That's like, where's your kid? We're splitting, we have 2 advisors in every homeroom. So we're splitting the advisors and we're saying, you're more focused on preparing for the social emotional lessons to teach every morning. And I'm going to be the kind of like attendance family person so that every morning starting at 7:45, you're getting ready to teach the SEL lesson. And I'm like calling, texting, trying to figure out how to get.
yeah.
So there's universal things. And then if we can get that higher, then we can start doing more of the like one-on-one problem solving.
Like Mercedes have a question.
Oh, hi. I totally agree with everything you're saying. And I think looking at situations now, because my grandson is actually at DC Prep now, he's in preschool and he love school. But I think the disconnect is with parents and getting them to do activities with the school and not feel like it's a chore
Yeah.
to do it. And it may sound harsh, but I just, when you look around and you see who's here, who's not, who's always absent, who's always here, it's pretty much the same parents that are showing up, for different events. And if we could somehow make it creative enough to get everyone there, most parents love to brag on their kids or love to show their kids off or, something fun and exciting just to bring them in, without making it seem like it's a oh gosh, we got to go to the school and it's almost sad that they feel like it's a chore, but the kids love it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the total thing with parents. I just think everything starts at home.
Yeah, I think that is our idea with the early childhood and kinder is these like 1 month in school things are ones where the kids are gonna like present or read with the parent or showcase something they learned or done so that there's that pressure, but also that it's positive and joyful and doesn't feel like a chore because that also won't help.
I think Lisa had a
Yeah.
comment
Yeah.
question.
So yeah, and this might be super redundant, and forgive me for asking. So is this issue in regards to attendance just in the pre-K and kindergarten level, or did you see an uptick in all grades?
Our attendance has decreased in all grades since COVID. And we have always had lower attendance in preschool and pre-K and kinder than anywhere else. I mean, they also get sick more than
Right.
it's like there's a lot of reasons for it. But theirs seems to have rebounded the slowest.
Gotcha.
But they are all lower, like universally than it was before COVID on every grade. And we've also had differences at different campuses. Like we've had a harder time at Anacostia
Mhm.
attendance than Benning and Edgewood. Like there's always been variation.
Mhm.
But I think what our experience is really consistent with national trends, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, I don't know whether parents are more likely to keep young children home now after COVID, because they're worried about them being sick or being exposed to contagion or something, but.
Yeah. Another factor that we've seen is also just if parents aren't employed, they might be more inclined to keep them home at times. Now, even in the context of COVID. I'm wondering though, if you could provide some examples of what you're finding for some of the older kids though. You spoke a lot about the younger ones and some strategies that you're going to be implementing next year, but I was wondering if you could speak on a few about for the older kids.
Yeah, I can. I think what some of the trickier cases with the upper middle school children is some of the mental health stuff that we're seeing that's really just hard. And so we have cases where the parent or the caregiver that lives with the 7th or 8th grader, they're kind of like, I don't know what to do. I can't force an 8th grader to do this, and they're facing mental health issues. And so that is really hard and complex work. And so we're really relying on our partnership with WISE, the clinicians that are on site at our school. We have our own clinicians and we have really great people we work with to help us help the family and the child navigate like when they're in that moment and they're just like, I don't want to come to school. I don't feel I feel whatever, and I don't want to come to school. So those situations are hard, and we have, I believe, more of them than we used to have. So that's kind of the tier 3 end of the spectrum. I think on the like tier 1 end of the spectrum, it's about investing the kids in what they want to see in their school. So it kind of connects to our next initiative, which is about student programming and student experiences. But when our sports teams are running at the middle schools, our attendance is there, and so we're really trying to think about what are the experiences that the kids want and how can we expand those to help them want to come to school, because for the older kids, they have to want to come. And so I'll jump into that initiative. It's number 3. It's the next slide. This is we're really trying to enhance the student experience through our programming. So keeping in line with our mission of high school readiness and building social emotional skills and strong habits, where we have a bunch of initiatives that I would put under this bucket. We're heavily revising our advisory curriculum, which in kindergarten through 8th grade, all the kids experience. And so really thinking about like the first unit of every year, the kids are going to do identity units that are very like age appropriate for the age where they get to build and share about their identity to build community. We are building on having the like months. So Hispanic Heritage Month, Pride Month, Black History Month, like every month having those kind of themes that all the kids are involved in and excited about. Picking topics that adding topics into the curriculum that we see our needs. So in the older grades, like we're adding into that curriculum stuff about social media, stuff about drugs and alcohol, stuff about topics that are relevant to them. So we're doing a lot of work on our advisory curriculum that we provide to teachers. We are delivering on fall SEL or social emotional learning field trips at every grade. So in September and October with Alicia's team's huge partnership, every grade is going to do what we're calling an SEL field trip. So ropes courses, team building, like get outside and get to know each other at the very beginning of the year to really build team. And we're testing, like we're going to test it this summer with all of our staff so that they know that experience feels like, so they feel equipped to help lead on it. And that we're taking them to places where there are teachers that are running it. And then building back our end of year trips, which were historically something we did really well. This year we kind of half did them. Last year we didn't really do them at all. And so having our end of year trips, especially in the upper middle schools, be really novel experiences where kids rock climb and whitewater raft and do that kind of thing. And then we are adding extracurricular offerings. We sort of have them, but they're pretty haphazard and they're not consistent. So we're concretizing it. The application went out this week. The teachers are really excited. They're going to earn stipends to teach. There's going to be clubs at every elementary school. There'll be 2 clubs. At every middle school, there'll be 2 clubs in the fall. If it goes well, we can expand. And there'll be sports. And at every middle school, there will be sports at every season. And so those are the kinds of things our kids and our families want and are asking for. The parent action team, which I mentioned, and some of the family stuff, I think fits under here as well.
That's good.
A lot of work and it's a lot of fun. The last initiative, I know I've been talking for a long time, is about staff and helping with their development and workload. Some of this you'll see overlap in other areas, but by focusing on their role clarity, we have a theory that it will support their staff experience, because they often tell us that one of the hardest things is when they have a co-teaching team and they're not clear on each other's roles. And it's frustrating. And then they also don't feel like they have the skills or the tools or the space to give each other feedback. And so we're really working on the collaboration structures and the role clarity as a way to help them with their job satisfaction. Adding lots of the resources I talked about so that they don't have to spend hours and hours creating the resource, making the science materials. You have an awesome science textbook. You get to spend the time thinking about how to make this come to life for your kids. We're doing cohort development. So we're going to have, for our assistant teachers, our academic intervention fellows, our junior teachers, we're going to have cohort learning, our science teachers, our social studies teachers, our English language learners, some cohort development periodically that we provide a little bit more centrally, because we've identified which cohorts of teachers could use more support in their development. We're really working on our continuous growth cycle, which to us means how do we help people know where they stand and know what their strengths are, and have like clear benchmarks where they get to step back with their supervisor and talk about what they want to do, what their aspirations are, what their goals are. We have some pilots. We're year 2 of our pilot teachers. We're piloting 2 other things. One's called Ready Week, where we have a team of adults who work on the same grade, and we're picking a week that's always a really tough week for teachers. So like the week of parent-teacher conferences or the week that grades are due. And we're saying to that team of teachers, work together to design a schedule where like kids are always safe and with an adult and learning, but you're giving each other some flexibility. So like you teach in the morning so that I can enter grades, and then I'll teach in the afternoon so you can. So we're piloting that as a way to learn about how to get adults to like work better together, to provide each other with more like flexibility, because teaching can be such an inflexible workplace. And the other one is expanded work blocks, which is kind of same idea, but it's like you can come in late and your partner can leave early to have the same thing. Help us think about how do we like cover for each other a bit more, because that's the way of the workforce is flexibility, and teaching doesn't often offer that. So we're trying to stay ahead of the curve on that and just like studying our benefits and how we do coverage and how we do PTO to be a workplace that feels possible for people to keep working. Those are our big initiatives. Do you guys have any other questions?
Have you gotten feedback from like the teachers and stuff yet? Are they, I would assume that they're on board since they've had a lot of input in development.
They're really excited. I would say they're really excited. You know, it's the kind of thing where it's like, in theory, they're like, yes, let's do extracurriculars. And I'm sure when it comes to it and it creates new after school management issues,
Yeah.
and, you know, there'll be other feelings. But right now, I would say they're very excited about the student experiences. They're very excited about getting more resources. They're very excited about focus on role clarity. They're very excited about the focus on collaboration. They're excited about the pilots to the extent that they understand them. So I would say there's high investment.
And you said that there are going to be 2 clubs. Do we know what those clubs are?
Each campus will get to choose.
Choose,
So the
okay.
idea is that the teachers submit a proposal.
Mhm.
So we know already we have like people submitting proposals for drama, STEM, chess, that kind of like things that the teachers feel passionate about. And what we're excited about is because then we know that that teacher is going to advertise it. And if they're cool, then a lot of kids are going to want to join. And we'll learn from it, see if we can expand it.
I was talking to Laura. If we do a STEM club, we may have some avenues to get funds for those from
Awesome.
some folks that we know at some of the big defense contractors that we could probably reach out to.
Cool. I think that at BEC that might happen,
Okay.
although they also really want to do a choir. So let's hope today.
And they could pull one off.
I know.
So how many students would the club be offered to?
So we're gonna put 2 adults in each club. So we're thinking about like 25-ish kids, and then we're gonna have to do a lottery if we're not gonna do first come first serve. We're gonna do a lottery if we get more interest, and then we're gonna just kind of see and learn from it. Because it's actually a big operational feat of like, it's been the infrastructure behind it, and then also making the cover, you know, who's the leader that's staying late to make sure that it's safe and but space, because we also still have aftercare that we don't run, but we have to partner with them, and so we're gonna take it slow.
And you said the club directors would get a stipend. Do we know about how much that is?
Yes, the clubs, it's 2 days a week. It's on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and there's 2 adults with you in your club. They each will get $750, and then the sports coaches will get $1,500 each. And the sports, we wanted to do flag football, but the league required them to start in July. So we're doing girls and boys basketball, girls and boys track, and we'll have cheerleading teams.
Okay.
And we budgeted for like good uniforms and transportation and the referees and the league costs and all the supplies for the clubs.
Awesome.
Looking at this whole side of the
Thanks to Dan
table,
for
looking
doing
at and Alicia, like, yes,
it's
there's
been-
the smile over
We
there.
accept
is-
volunteers. Chief Thomas, Coach, supervise.
So lots of gratitude to the many people who are putting in a lot of work to figure this out. So Alicia's team is doing a lot, Cassie's team's doing a lot, Dan's team's doing a lot. So there's a lot happening.
Yeah.
It sounds great.
That's really exciting. Any more questions? Awesome, great job. So I think
I
the
just
next,
had
Oh, one question.
excuse me.
Go.
I was gonna say, I think that's a great way to get parents involved with all the extracurricular.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. We're thinking the parent action team, they're gonna help us with family events. with extracurriculars and clubs, with the field trips. Like, we're trying to make sure that we think about how the families fit into all this. That's a really important point. Oh yeah, and the parents can be co-coaches.
Okay, great.
All right.
Perfect timing.
Yes.
You're on the spot.
All right, yeah, that's good. This is Julie Mueller. She's our Director of High School Placement. She's worked here for many years and has done a tremendous job of helping our students and families navigate the complex world of figuring out what high school to go to. There are many people in this community who would speak very lovingly about the work that Julie has done to help them figure out the right match. Great, thank you.
And as a parent who's gone through this process, she's amazing.
That's very
Say
sweet.
enough about her. She's amazing, and she does it for all of the parents. So but we're fortunate and blessed to have her.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I've lived through it. So.
Thank you. It's good to see a lot of you. I know we're all at different levels of our understanding of what DC Prep does for high school placement. So some of you have walked through it with me
Yes.
this year with your daughter, or have been a part of this since the very beginning, and others are new. So I was just going to give a slight overview of what we do in high school placement at DC Prep. Highlight a few things from the report that you all received, and then talk about some next steps based on the data, and answer questions you may have. Take the bulk of our time for that. So feel free to interrupt me. I think that we at DC Prep, we work with all of our families beginning in 7th grade, and most of the work is done in the 8th grade year. And it looks very much like what you think of in terms of college counseling in a high school. So meeting with families, talking to students, making a school list, this kind of process that a lot more people tend to be familiar with than a high school placement process. And we have a very clear philosophy when we approach this, which is we are looking for every student to find the best path to the best college. That is what we're here to do. And we have to work with families to find where that ideal meets them, right? So if that's transportation issues or where they need to be in the city, that's childcare concerns, older siblings need to escort younger siblings to school, financial considerations for families looking at private school. But it is a very hands-on process. One person on Cassie's team calls it our concierge service. So we get to know, which I'm not sure how I feel about that term, but I started to work in a hotel or something. We really get to know all the kids and their families and work together to prioritize school options for them. And it is part of every student's experience at DC Prep. So it isn't, this group of kids gets high school placement or that group or this. It is embedded in the experience of being a 7th and 8th grader at our school. So it's part of your weekly class schedule. It is part of your parent-teacher conference. It's part of back to school night. High school placement exists within the school community. So if we look, they all got the report, correct? Okay, so just a few things to highlight. I think to me, the biggest thing, or, I sort of have walked around in the last 2 years feeling a bit like an imposter of being an expert at this, because I feel like I am relearning schools post-pandemic, whereas some are starting to look a lot like what they looked like pre-pandemic, some are not. And we are very much having to sort of relearn what we once knew. And while education in this city changes a lot, which makes this job continually interesting, it changed so much in the pandemic. And so watching that and kind of recalibrating our understanding of what's going to be the best fit for our students is to me, like the biggest task at hand right now. I think the decrease in willingness to travel that we're seeing from families is very much a result of the pandemic. So, like even And it's the sort of circumference is growing as where people would go, but pandemic, people don't want the train. People don't want, it's like very much like, let's stay close. And that's broadening somewhat, but it's still something we're seeing very much so as a result of the pandemic that we didn't see nearly as much of pre-pandemic.
Is it because the health aspects or the school safety, just the the challenges with crime?
I think it's all of the above. I mean, I think we all got a little bit closer to our circles, right? And so I think there's those pieces of like closer to home, more time at home, less travel, less need. And I think some of it is safety based. Some of it is, I think all of the things you said are true. It's not the same thing for each family, but we see the same trend across the board in both campuses pretty equally, I'd say. I think the other thing, so if we look at this year's data, when we look at the highly selective magnet data combined with the sort of private school data, like most of our kids that got into private school could have chosen a space at a highly selective school. So that is looking back to more where we want it to be in terms of students heading to places that have a lot of momentum, right? This is just all about momentum, right? When you go to school with a lot of people who are all headed toward college, the probability that you go to college increases. Right? So those numbers are feeling better. I'm sure you noticed that BMC's private school numbers were down quite a bit. This was really family driven, and a lot of families saying, and this is again one of these pandemic trends that's like, I have too much on my plate. I cannot handle the additional work that this will involve right now. So like, I get that this is a cool option, but not right now. It's very much feedback that I received very open and honestly from a number of families, and don't see as we enter next year nearly as much. I think when we look at kind of what we're going to do with this information, we really want to continue to increase the number of students that attend highly selected schools. Again, this idea of the momentum and putting them in really strong places. We need to continue to monitor like what's going on in the city, the term, I don't like the term winners and losers, but who's doing a really good job at serving our students and who is failing at that mission as we look toward 9th to 12th grade. And then, as we get ready for having, I just scheduled last night the 7th grade high school placement kickoff for Anacostia in the fall. I was really excited. I've never put an Anacostia date, like official high school placement date on my calendar. So it's very exciting. It also means we're going to have a lot more students to place in the city. And what we really hope to do is to continue to build these numbers is just continue to increase our outreach to families and working with them sooner, more often to engage them in a conversation of high school earlier and more often. And it feels like people have sort of the mind share to do that at this point, right? Where for a few years we had the like, I cannot take on one more thing. And I, as a parent, I felt that way too, right? When you're like at home and your kids are there and all of that, you're like, I cannot take on one more thing. And we see less of that. I think that we want to provide more support for families who are interested in it's a laborious private school placement process. It just takes a lot of time and want to continue to increase that support so families don't shy away from it and continue to increase our knowledge of strong high school options for our students. Then I included historical data if you all have questions, but I'm curious to know what I can answer for this group because I'm positive that when given data, you all have questions.
Well, just to follow up on something you mentioned. So if part of the goal is to increase families' interest in pursuing private schools, what about the financial issues associated with that? I mean, if a child gets into one of the good private schools, but still has financial need, do most of those schools figure out a way to provide for it?
Yes, that's typically been our experience. So I think that when we have students who have demonstrated financial need and the school wants them, we can usually figure out how to make that work. They will reach for a student they want. And when we're talking about the boarding schools, really strong independent schools, they will hand out all the
So the
money
family's
that's
not
needed.
having to take out.
That's
debt
correct.
or
No,
anything.
we are not doing high school debt. Like college is far too expensive
Yeah.
to think about high school debt at this point. Yeah, I would not advise anyone to do that.
All I hear is praise for your efforts. And one mother that was so proud to tell me that, I think she said $400,000 my daughter just earned next year efforts to a full scholarship for a boarding school in Massachusetts. I mean, it's pretty amazing where we get to send some of these kids.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of opportunities. I think early on, we worried, like, would we run out of spaces in the private schools to put students in financial aid? And that's clearly not the situation.
So your goal, I mean, I
Yeah.
just running through those real quickly. We had one time in Edgewood, 75% of all kids going to highly selective schools, private or
Yeah.
the top schools. Yeah, you have a goal to reach it, yeah.
It's a good question and one that I wrestle with a lot because as the city has evolved, some of the schools that we wouldn't define as highly selective are quite strong. And so when we have a student that gets into one of those, we're very happy with those results, right? So so I think that it really depends on the student and the family, because again, it's best path to best college, and sometimes a different school is going to lead in that direction. So I think I'd answer that way. I think that we need to continue. What we don't want to see are placements that keep me up at night, right? The places that we're like, is this going to work? Is this kid going to make it? And the questions we ask of our alumni support team and going out is who is not ready for college, right? The like terrible loop is I apply to college, I get in, but I have to take remedial classes in college because all of a sudden I've got to pay for those. And then I don't get credit toward college. So I'm in debt and I haven't even started my college education yet. Right? That is the path we're out to avoid. And we can avoid that without everyone going to a highly selective school, right? Because some schools operate by lottery, but are just as strong.
So could you give us some examples of like the ones that you think are not necessarily highly selective, but they do a good job generally? And then what are the ones that you hope we don't ever send a child to?
So I'm curious on how much we want to say about that in a.
Yeah, I think maybe that's a great question. We should follow up with you about
Yeah.
that. We can definitely share more information.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's
but-
okay. I just think that, this is a public meeting.
Sure.
Yep.
Understood.
Has the approach changed at all, given the lack or the change in testing and that there is not testing?
Yeah, very much. So I think we've had to change. So historically, we did very well in some of the testing, particularly when Schools at Walls had its city tests. Like our students, typically students who did well on standardized tests, like Park did very well on that test. Our students did very well, so they did very well. So that's changed. Just we used to very much be able to anticipate who would get in, and feels more arbitrary at this point because it's sort of interview based. So with that, we have to create bigger lists for kids. So that piece has changed. I think that, we see some private schools completely abandoning testing. We see some starting to bring it back, very much so. And we see some in sort of hybrid, like we don't have standardized testing, but we have a Saturday that you have to come and read things and write some stuff down for us. So and I think that we're going to continue to see all types in DC in particular. When we look at boarding schools, testing has returned for the most part. So we're back into like planning exactly how we'll do test prep next year in a much more formal way than we've had to this past year, because it just didn't matter that much for our students to do that. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I guess, is the
Yeah.
city said they're not going back, or it's still TBD?
So as far as I know, like the communication that we've received is that there will not be a test school without walls, but nobody has said anything in particular for next year. Whether the city, you all may know more than I do, whether they will look at park scores next year as part of an application, I don't know. This year, they didn't even accept them. There was no place for me as a counselor to put in a student's park score in their application to a high school. Like a selective school did not have a space for it. So we'll see if that comes back. I think that in general, people felt a lot of times scores were not trustworthy last year based on the situation in most schools last year. So I think that it's not viewed as a good metric. And we'll see if that returns.
I will say that they still had
Oh, sorry.
essay and do a math problem when they went to the select schools.
Some of them.
Yes.
Yes, some of them did, right? So this is this whole like, we don't test, but
Yeah.
here's your writing sample,
Yes.
you know, kind of thing. So this is what's like, they're sort of thinking about how this is going to evolve.
That was my question is, do we have any indication from the Independent School Association that if they are all going to adopt, yes, we're going back to all giving SSAT or a different test, or are they all going to go off, which they started to do this year, even on these, like you're mentioning, all these kind of individual different internal tests?
I see it
I
very,
think that will just make it harder for test prep. So that's why I was curious.
yeah, it does. I see it very different from different schools and sort of their philosophies. So some have very much embraced this, we will not use standardized testing. And I see sort of running with that as part of who they are as an independent school. And some have said, actually, this really helps us to bring the right student to our environment and we want it back. And I don't see, there's not one voice speaking on that. So I think that, yes, it will continue to be a challenge as we prep students for tests, but they aren't always so dissimilar from each other. So things like vocabulary practice and analogies show up a lot of times, right? Things like that.
Julie, how do our students do at these very top, highly competitive schools? Do we have a good track record? Do our kids perform well and does that help our record in the subsequent years?
So, yeah, so I think that we are well loved at many of the independent schools, right? Like it's really fun to sit in my seat because everybody answers my call, which is nice. And yes, our students are doing incredibly well in a lot of these places. In fact, I got a text yesterday that we have the president of the senior class at one of the independent schools in DC is going to be one of our students.
Wow.
And you know, our strongest college placements this year, like we talk about students going to Harvard next year, we talk about the University of Pennsylvania, like these are all students coming out of independent schools.
Is that our first one at
Wesleyan,
Harvard?
this is our first one to Harvard. Yeah, that yeah. And Wesleyan is and you know, was a Gates Scholar and going to Wesleyan on a full scholarship out of an independent school. So like, I think the college results alone say how well those students are showing up and making an impact on the environment at that school and, you know, making a name for themselves. Like, you don't just go there, you don't just go there and get into a great college, right? Those days are gone, right? Those are long gone, but you have to go in and really make a difference on the campus you're on in order to make that happen. So we really don't have kids. You know, I got really worried in the beginning when we would have specifically boarding school students. Would people get homesick? Would they want to come back? Would they, you know, all these pieces. And that we have one student in the second year who came home from boarding school for being homesick and went to Walls and loved it. And it was fine. But no, they don't. Like, people stay. They go and really have positive experiences. And I think just the fact that the high schools keep coming back and saying, okay, so tell us who's applying this year. So let us know, is just the testament to how our students are doing in those spaces. Yes.
Hallie, your husband mentioned us looking at the boarding school where your daughter goes to.
Westminster,
Mm-hmm.
Connecticut.
Yeah.
It's been a very happy, joyful experience.
That's great.
Yeah.
And they have somehow instilled a love of learning, which is new to me. So would recommend.
That's great. I really want to reopen this idea of boarding school because, of course, if you can imagine not wanting to leave your neighborhood in the pandemic, boarding school kind of all got shut. I mean, like one student go because his brother was at a school. You know, the family already knew the place; they felt really comfortable with it. But we took all the seventh graders who made the honor roll to Episcopal High School just because it's like in the neighborhood and it's a 7-day boarding school. Like people live there to tour. And of course, I was with 7th graders yesterday at lunch, and everyone's, I'm going to Episcopal. They're all, whatever school you show 7th graders, they all are going, and they're going together, and they're like picked out their dorm room and all. But to open up this idea, and I said, so we talked about this when we got on the bus that day, right? My point was not to show you one school. My point was to show you a type of school to consider and to try to open that up, because boarding school does bring so many interesting opportunities and a lot of financial aid money. When we broaden and look up the East Coast, it's just a lot of opportunities for our students who are interested in going away from home and that experience.
Yeah, and I spoke to Laura about this too, and she was saying if we identify some of those folks and we could find the funds to like give them a trip out there so they could check it out and stuff like that. And so
That's great. I mean, we have had some students do fly-ins like the way colleges do. Some of the boarding schools, we had a student fly into a boarding school in California a few years ago, just based off of her grades and test scores. They were like, here's a plane ticket for you and your mom in California. And mom called and was like, I don't think I'm sending her to California, but I just got a free plane ticket. We're going to go at this school. And they really liked it. And they didn't end up going there, but ended up the East Coast. But there are some of those, and most of the schools, what they'll do is they do most things over Zoom, right? So they interview in those pieces, but then if a student is accepted with a significant financial aid package, they fly in the student and a family member to look at the school. So there aren't, like, the barriers to look don't exist a ton, because the schools know what they have to do. If they want a student, they're going to work to get them there. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You'll already need the audience. Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, you have a good chair.
Good has many definitions.
That's right.
all right, I'll just open it up before we go into closed session. Any other questions before we go into closed session for the group that's here from the board? Okay, if not, could I have a motion to go into closed session? I have a second?
Second.
All right, Lisa. Vote.
Again?
All right, Mercedes,
Yes.
Ahmad,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
those in the room? All right, the ayes have it. We are now in closed session, so I would ask you guys to, you don't have to go home, but you gotta get out of here.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
It's so stressful.
I mean,